The Quilvorian supremacy had conquered 63 star systems, subjugated 418 species, and accumulated enough bureaucratic paperwork to build a monument to administrative tedium visible from orbit. On what passed for a Thursday in the galactic standard calendar, based on the rotation of a star that had collapsed into a black hole 2 millennia ago, but whose timestamp remained legally binding, Captain Velox Kryn sat in his command pod reviewing colonization candidates when his secondary breathing valve hiccuped. This was never good. Velox had been assigned to evaluate planet 44222F, catalogued in the database as water-heavy, primitive inhabitants, possibly exploitable. The locals called it Earth, which sounded less like a planet name and more like what happened when someone sneezed mid-sentence. The specifications looked aggressively mundane. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, carbon-based life, temperature ranges that wouldn't immediately boil or freeze biological matter, standard gravitational constant, utterly, suspiciously, dangerously boring. But there was a problem that made Velox's tertiary stomach clench with bureaucratic horror. 4 exploration vessels had approached planet 4422F in the last 2 galactic cycles. None had returned. Communication had terminated exactly 39 seconds after atmospheric penetration in every single case. The final transmission from exploration craft Sigma had been disturbing. It featured the sound of something wet rupturing, followed by gurgling, followed by what the audio forensics team described as the noise you'd hear if someone tried to scream through organs that were actively relocating. The Quilvorian High Command, in its infinite wisdom and finite patience, had decided this mystery required investigation. Not because they cared about the lost crews, personnel came with surprisingly reasonable insurance policies, but because losing 4 ships to an underdeveloped backwater planet was embarrassing. The efficiency reports looked dreadful. The Galactic Council of Moderately Threatening Civilizations had downgraded their threat rating from concerningly aggressive to trying their best. It was humiliating. Velox's superior war administrator Felnix, the bureaucratically enraged, had made the situation clear during their last meeting. "Kryn!" he had shrieked, his communication membranes vibrating with administrative fury. "Do you comprehend what this is doing to our quarterly assessments? We're being mocked. The Telvaxian Concordat sent us a sympathy card, with a picture of a sad asteroid on it. This is unacceptable." Thus, Velox found himself commanding an expedition to planet 4422F with explicit orders. Determine what was killing exploration teams, document it with appropriate forms, and preferably find a way to colonize the wretched place anyway, because the marketing department had already commissioned the promotional materials. The expedition team assembled in Launch Bay 9 consisted of what military logistics called optimal resource distribution, and what everybody else called whoever couldn't invent a convincing excuse fast enough. There was Pilot Renzik, a Glorbellian whose species had evolved in zero-gravity environments and consequently looked like someone had tried to compress an octopus into a cube using nothing but disappointment and physics. Renzik had been chosen because Glorbellians could theoretically survive extreme conditions, and also because he owed Velox money from a gambling game where the rules had been suspiciously vague. Then came Science Officer Drinix, a Quellic female who possessed 6 separate brain lobes, 14 advanced degrees, and absolutely no concept of danger recognition. Drinix had volunteered enthusiastically, which should have been a red flag, but the Supremacy had a strict policy of never discourage volunteering even when it's obviously suicidal. Completing the team was Security Chief Molvrak, a career military officer who had survived 91 combat scenarios, received 372 medals, and harbored a deep suspicion that the universe was personally conspiring against him. Molvrak had been assigned as tactical insurance, which was military terminology for the one who might actually keep everyone alive. The vessel itself, the administratively inevitable, was a standard Quilvorian survey ship. It featured impressive sensor arrays, adequate weapons, comfortable rest chambers, and a beverage dispenser that had achieved consciousness but was too polite to mention it. "Attention!" Velox announced as they gathered in the briefing chamber, which smelled of disinfectant and crushed dreams. "Our mission is uncomplicated. We descend to planet 4422F, determine what eliminated our previous teams, conduct thorough atmospheric evaluation, and return with exploitable intelligence. Questions?" Renzik raised a tentacle. "What about the exploding?" "The what?" "The exploding, Captain. The reports mentioned exploding." Velox consulted his datapad, scrolling through incident reports with mounting discomfort. "Ah, correct. There were some mentions of rapid organic dissolution. The medical analysis suggests the previous teams experienced what we might professionally describe as catastrophic cellular destabilization, or in colloquial terms, they went pop." "Pop?" Drinix leaned forward, all 6 of her brain lobes pulsing with scientific curiosity. "As in sudden decompression. But that's impossible. The planet's atmospheric pressure is 1 standard unit. That's perfectly normal. We should be completely safe unless— Oh my! Oh, this is intriguing!" Everyone stared at the scientist, who had suddenly gone very quiet in a way that suggested she'd just realized something either brilliant or apocalyptic. And with scientists, those categories often overlapped. "Unless what?" Molvrak growled. "Unless," Drinix said carefully, "we've been interpreting the data incorrectly. What if 1 standard atmosphere on planet 4422F isn't equivalent to 1 standard atmosphere in our measurement system? The Galactic Council's standardized atmospheric pressure based on the median of surveyed worlds. But if Earth somehow falls outside that median, then what?" Velox demanded. "Then visiting it might be equivalent to diving into a compression chamber made of condensed air." Drinix paused. "But that's probably fine. I mean, what are the odds?" Molvrak made a noise that sounded like gravel experiencing grief. "Based on my experience, Captain, the odds are extremely high that we're about to die in a statistically improbable, yet somehow completely predictable manner. Your pessimism is noted and filed under excessive negativity. Drinix, how long to modify our environmental suits? Give me 9 hours, an engineering crew, and permission to violate several safety protocols. You have 7 hours and my authorization to commit technical crimes against manufacturer recommendations." While Drinix and the engineering team worked on the suits, Velox made the critical error of actually researching the planet they were about to visit. The database contained information gathered from long-range surveillance, intercepted communications, and one particularly confused observation drone that had spent 6 weeks disguised as a migratory bird before being accidentally consumed by a hawk. Earth's dominant species, humans, were peculiar. They possessed only 2 optical organs, which seemed inefficient. They ambulated on 2 lower appendages, which seemed unstable. They required constant consumption of oxygen, water, and something called pizza to maintain functionality. Their civilization had invented weapons capable of planetary destruction before developing interstellar navigation, which suggested either remarkable bravery or remarkable stupidity, possibly both simultaneously. But what genuinely disturbed Velox were the environmental conditions humans considered acceptable. They existed at the bottom of an atmospheric ocean that would crush most species, like insects, under a bureaucrat's stamp. They casually experienced temperature fluctuations that ranged from freeze immediately to spontaneous combustion with seasonal regularity. Their planet was 70% covered in corrosive saltwater, and they voluntarily immersed themselves in it for recreation. "They swim in it," Velox muttered to himself, staring at the data with profound confusion. "They actually swim, deliberately, for enjoyment." Molvrak, who had entered to deliver a status report, glanced at the screen. "What's swimming?" Apparently, it's when you submerge yourself in liquid and propel yourself using coordinated appendage movements. Humans do it competitively, sometimes while consuming food, sometimes while on fire. While on fire. There's a notation here about something called fire swimming, but I'm hoping that's a translation malfunction. I'm praying it's a translation malfunction. The security chief studied the information with characteristic grimness. Captain, I'm examining these biological specifications. Humans breathe oxygen. Quilvorians breathe oxygen. Humans require pressure around 1 standard unit. That kills us. Captain, I believe we've discovered a species that's fundamentally lethal to us at a basic environmental level. Nonsense. We just need superior suits. Captain, respectfully, I believe we need superior life decisions. The modified environmental suits looked like what would happen if a deep-sea exploration vessel had a romantic relationship with a military bunker, and then that offspring was raised by paranoid parents who wrapped it in safety foam. They were bulky, reinforced, and according to Drinix, theoretically survivable for at least 18 minutes before critical systems failure. That's not encouraging, Molvrak observed. I'm a scientist, not a motivational speaker. The suits will maintain internal pressure at our comfortable level, while the external pressure attempts to compress us like juice containers. It's perfectly safe assuming nothing malfunctions, which, statistically speaking, something always does. They stood in the launch bay, 3 figures wrapped in enough protective equipment to survive a supernova, preparing to descend to a planet whose only offense was having a normal atmosphere. Final equipment verification, Velox ordered, his voice crackling through the suit's communication system. Renzik, life support operational, pressure compensation active, existential terror at maximum capacity. Drinix, all 6 brain lobes are functional, which means I'm 6 times as capable of recognizing what a catastrophically bad idea this is. Shall we proceed regardless? Molvrak? The security chief simply grunted, which in military terminology meant everything from systems nominal to, I warned you this was idiotic, to, why do I continue accepting these assignments when I could retire to a nice quiet moon somewhere? They boarded the landing shuttle, a compact craft designed for atmospheric entry and equipped with enough safety mechanisms to make insurance underwriters weep with joy. The bay doors opened, revealing Earth below them, a blue and white sphere that looked deceptively peaceful. Remember, Velox said as they began their descent, we're creating history. First successful Quilvorian landing on planet 4422F. Our designations will be commemorated. Assuming we survive to file the documentation, Molvrak muttered. The shuttle penetrated the atmosphere and immediately every alarm in the cockpit began screaming. Not metaphorically. The ship's safety systems had achieved a level of panic previously observed only in sentient computers who had just discovered existential philosophy. That's standard, Renzik shouted over the noise. Atmospheric entry is always alarming. Literally. They descended through clouds that looked harmless from orbit but felt like falling through semi-solid anxiety. The pressure readings on their suits began climbing. 1 standard unit, 1.06, 1.12. The numbers crept upward with malicious intent. Velox felt his suit constricting around him as the internal systems fought to maintain comfortable pressure against the increasing external crush. It was like being hugged by physics with excessive enthusiasm. I can feel my internal organs rearranging, Drinix announced, sounding far too interested. This is either adaptation or the preliminary stages of death. Fascinating either way. They broke through the cloud layer and got their first unobscured view of Earth's surface. It was green, aggressively green. Vegetation covered the landscape in chaotic, uncontrolled patterns that suggested nature had received design authority and absolutely no supervision. There were trees, massive trees, that stretched toward the sky as if attempting to escape the planet itself. That's abnormal, Molvrak said. Plants shouldn't achieve that size. They're adapted to high oxygen content and crushing atmospheric pressure, Drinix explained. They've evolved to flourish in conditions that would eliminate most species. It's actually quite beautiful in a horrifying sort of way. The shuttle touched down in what the sensors identified as a meadow, which meant it was slightly less aggressively vegetated than the surrounding territory. The moment they landed, Velox noticed something peculiar. Everything outside was moving. The trees swayed in wind that their suit's external sensors indicated was only 17 kilometers per hour, but the way the branches moved suggested they were somehow fighting the air itself. Birds, actual flying creatures, soared overhead with an ease that seemed impossible given the atmospheric density. Pressure at landing location, 1.02 standard units, Renzik reported. Slightly above sea level measurement. Our suits are compensating, but I'm detecting stress warnings on the hull integrity. We've only just landed, and the shuttle is already failing. It's not failing, Captain. It's just complaining, loudly, with warning indicators. Velox made another decision that would later be classified as questionable. We're exiting the shuttle. Brief surface survey, collect specimens, return immediately. 8-minute operation. They opened the hatch. The sound hit them first. Earth was loud. There was wind, which their planets had but quieter. There were animals making noises that ranged from pleasant chirping to, "What is that and why does it sound hostile?" There was something called insects that apparently existed in swarms and made a collective humming that suggested either biological activity or a very distributed electrical malfunction. Velox stepped onto Earth's surface and immediately comprehended why the previous teams had perished. The pressure was immense. His suit strained and creaked, the servos whining as they fought to keep him inflated like a celebration balloon with delusions of grandeur. Every movement felt like pushing through invisible treacle composed of air molecules with personal vendettas. "This is normal for them!" Renzik gasped, his gelatinous form compressed into something more resembling a stressed cube. "Humans exist in this!" "Not just exist," Drinix said, consulting her datapad while swaying slightly. "They run in this, they exercise, they do something called marathon running, which is apparently running for 42 kilometers without stopping, voluntarily." Molvrak took a careful step forward, his military training the only thing keeping him functional. "I feel like I'm carrying my own weight, plus several additional weights belonging to other individuals. How do humans ambulate? They're constructed for this." Drinix was taking readings with scientific instruments that were beeping in distress. Human muscular and skeletal systems evolved under constant high pressure. Their bones are dense. Their muscles operate against this every single day. They're essentially ambulatory hydraulic systems optimized for crushing force. A sound made them freeze. It was footsteps, heavy, rhythmic, approaching rapidly. Through the trees came a human. At least their databases indicated it was human. It looked like a biological impossibility. The creature was jogging, that voluntary running they'd discussed, wearing what appeared to be minimal covering and making a wheezing sound that the translator identified as breathing hard but not experiencing critical failure somehow. The human noticed them, stopped jogging, and stared. The Quilvorian team stared back. For a moment, two species regarded each other across the vast gulf of evolutionary incompatibility. Then the human did something that would be analyzed in Quilvorian biology laboratories for decades. It waved, just casually raised one appendage in a gesture of greeting while standing in conditions that were actively killing them, breathing pressure that was crushing their organs, existing in an environment that required their suits' every system running at maximum capacity. And the human was barely clothed. It wore what looked like thin fabric strips that covered maybe 35% of its body mass. It was voluntarily exposing most of its skin to the crushing atmosphere and seemed fine. "Is it dying?" Renzik whispered. "I don't believe so," Drinix whispered back. "Its vital signs appear healthy. Elevated heart rate, but that's apparently normal during exercise. It's not exploding." "Why isn't it exploding?" The human called out something. The translator, designed for 62 languages across known space, struggled for a moment before producing Good morning. Beautiful day for a run. Are you guys okay? You look like you're having a rough time. Velox attempted to respond, but his communication system chose that moment to malfunction under pressure stress. What emerged was a sound like gargling gravel mixed with electronic feedback. The human's face changed to what the database identified as concern. It took a step closer. "No!" Mulvrak shouted, stumbling backward. "Maintain distance! You're terrifying, and we don't comprehend how you're alive!" The translator must have functioned because the human stopped, holding up both hands in what was apparently a universal gesture of not threatening, just confused. Another human appeared, then another. Suddenly, they were surrounded by 7 of the creatures, all of whom seemed fascinated by the alien visitors and completely unbothered by the fact that they were standing in an environment that was literally crushing sentient beings to death. One of them was holding a small device and pointing it at them, making clicking sounds. The database identified this as photography, which was apparently how humans captured images for social documentation and also possibly for categorizing new forms of entertainment. "Janet!" one human shouted to another. "Look at this! I think we've got aliens! Actual aliens! And they look like they're suffering! Should we help them?" "Help them how? Do you know alien first aid?" "No, but we could try. Maybe they need water. Everyone needs water." They were discussing rescue protocols. These humans, who existed in hellish pressure conditions with casual indifference, were concerned about the aliens in advanced protective suits. The irony was suffocating, metaphorically and also literally, because Velox's suit was reporting oxygen recycling complications. "We need to leave," Mulvrak said urgently. "Now! My suit's failing. I can feel the pressure. I can feel it." They retreated to the shuttle in what could generously be called a controlled panic, and more accurately described as a scrambling flight while attempting to maintain dignity. The humans watched, some still taking pictures, others talking rapidly into communication devices. As the shuttle lifted off, Velox looked back at the humans who were already dispersing, returning to their incomprehensible lives in their impossible environment. One was jogging again. Another extracted a strange object and began consuming it, eating in crushing pressure, multitasking survival and nutrition. "Abort mission," Velox said quietly. "Return to the ship. We're departing." "Captain?" Renzik asked, confused. "We barely collected any data." "We collected sufficient data." Velox stared at Earth, shrinking below them. "We learned that there's a species that exists in conditions that eliminate us, that thrives in them, that does recreational activities in pressure that crushes our organs. And they don't even realize how extraordinary that is." Back on the administratively inevitable, they filed their report. Velox spent 5 hours writing it, deleted everything 4 times, and finally settled on Planet 4422F, unsuitable for Quilvorian colonization. Recommend classification as a void unless you enjoy explosive decompression of ocular organs. Indigenous species appears friendly, but is biologically incompatible with existence. He submitted the report and attempted to forget about Earth and its terrifying inhabitants who jogged in death pressure for recreation. The galaxy, however, had other plans. 3 weeks after Velox's report circulated through Quilvorian bureaucracy, something unexpected happened. The humans contacted them. It started with a transmission that appeared on every Quilvorian communication frequency simultaneously, which was either impressive technical skill or spectacular luck. The image showed a human female, older, with grey hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and was unimpressed by most of it. "Hello," she said, her voice translated into Quilvorian with reasonable accuracy. "This is Secretary General Patricia Mendez of the United Nations of Earth. We noticed your spacecraft visiting our planet recently. We also noticed you left rather quickly and appeared distressed. We're wondering if you're all right. Also, we'd like to talk. We have questions. Probably you have questions too." Let's have a conversation like reasonable beings. Please respond when convenient." The transmission ended. The Quilvorian High Command stared at the recording in collective confusion. "They're worried about us?" War Administrator Felnick said slowly. "Apparently," Velox confirmed, "the species that lives in conditions that killed 4 of our exploration teams is concerned about our well-being." "That appears to be the situation, yes. That's the most absurd thing I've heard this cycle, and I once listened to a 3-hour presentation on optimizing paperclip distribution across 17 departments. But absurd or not, the humans had made contact. Protocol demanded a response. After 6 committee meetings, 17 draft proposals, and 1 heated argument about comma placement, the Quilvorians sent a reply. Velox, now officially designated Human Relations Specialist through a combination of experience and nobody else wanting the job, appeared on screen looking as dignified as a gelatinous alien slug could manage. "Greetings, humans of Earth. We are the Quilvorian Supremacy, representatives of the Galactic Council of Moderately Threatening Civilizations. We appreciate your concern. We are physically well, though psychologically disturbed by your planet's atmospheric pressure, which is lethal to our species. We departed rapidly to avoid casualties. We would indeed like to establish communication, though we must do so remotely due to biological incompatibility." The response came back within hours. Secretary General Mendez appeared again, this time with additional humans beside her. One was introduced as Dr. Leopold Winterborn, atmospheric physicist and enthusiast of bizarre problems. Wait! Dr. Winterborn interrupted before Mendez could speak, his enthusiasm barely contained. "Your species can't survive Earth's atmospheric pressure. That's fascinating. What's your baseline? How much differential are we talking? Is it the oxygen content, the nitrogen, the pressure itself?" "Winterborn," Mendez said tiredly, "let them actually answer before you bombard them with 17 more questions." "Right, sorry, excited, continue." Velox found himself almost liking these bizarre creatures. "Our species evolved on worlds with approximately 0.7 standard atmospheric pressure. Your planet registers at 1.02 by our measurements. The differential causes rapid compression of our biological structures, particularly our ocular organs, which are gelatinous and vulnerable to pressure changes." "Your eyes explode!" Winterborn looked delighted. "That's terrible, but also scientifically incredible. Oh, we can help. We have pressure suit technology. We use it for deep-sea diving and space exploration. We could design something for you. You could visit Earth safely." "Why would you do that?" Velox asked, genuinely confused. "Because it's interesting," Winterborn grinned. "And because if there are aliens out there, we should probably figure out how to interact with them, even if our biology is incompatible. Plus, think of the scientific collaboration possibilities." Mendez nodded. "Dr. Winterborn is enthusiastic, but he's not wrong. If we're not alone in the universe, we should establish friendly relations when possible. Your species appears peaceful, or at least non-aggressive toward us. We'd like to maintain that relationship. Plus, frankly, we're curious about everything. That's kind of humanity's defining characteristic. We see something impossible and think, how can we make this possible? Over the following months, something unprecedented occurred. The Quilvorians and humans established an actual diplomatic relationship despite never being able to share physical space without extensive protective equipment. Video conferences became routine. Human scientists collaborated with Quilvorian researchers on comparative biology, atmospheric physics, and pressure adaptation technologies. The Quilvorians shared information about the broader galaxy, the various species, political structures, technological developments, and which civilizations to avoid because they were either dangerous or incredibly annoying. The humans absorbed this information with frightening speed and started making plans. "So," Mendez said during one conference, You're telling me there are approximately 60 major spacefaring civilizations and several hundred minor ones, all with different biological requirements and technological capabilities? Correct, Velox confirmed. And nobody's unified. It's all separate governments and councils and occasional trade agreements. That's the general structure, yes. The Galactic Council coordinates major issues, but most species operate independently. Mendez glanced at her colleagues. That sounds familiar. We've been doing that on Earth for millennia. Hundreds of nations, different cultures, separate governments, occasional cooperation. And how has that worked for you? Terribly. We've had countless wars, but we're getting better at the cooperation part. Slowly, very slowly, with frequent backsliding. That's galactic politics exactly, Molvrak interjected. Except with more species and occasionally someone tries to destroy a planet. We've come close to destroying our own planet several times, a human military advisor named General Felix Kowalski added. So, we understand the concept. The conversations continued, plans developed, and eventually the humans proposed something that made the Quilvorians question whether the pressure differential had somehow affected their brains. We want to build you a habitat, Winterborn explained, displaying diagrams that looked simultaneously brilliant and insane. On Earth, a large pressurized dome where you can exist comfortably in your preferred atmospheric conditions. You'd be able to visit our planet, observe our civilization, and we could interact in person through pressure barriers. Think of it as an embassy, but with more emphasis on not dying. You want to construct a specialized facility just so we can visit? Velox asked. Yes, why not? We build structures all the time. This would just be a structure with very specific internal pressure requirements. We've already got the technology. We use similar systems for underwater habitats and space stations. This would just be the inverse application. But why invest this much effort? Mendez answered this time. Because you're the first extraterrestrial intelligence we've ever encountered. That's historically significant. Also, you've been remarkably helpful with information about the galaxy. You could have ignored us or tried to exploit our lack of knowledge, but you've been straightforward and even friendly, despite us living in conditions that literally kill you. That deserves reciprocation. Plus, Winterborn added, it's going to be such an interesting engineering project. The Quilvorian High Command debated the proposal for 6 weeks. Multiple committees analyzed potential risks, benefits, political implications, and insurance costs. Eventually, they reached a decision that surprised everyone, including themselves. They accepted. Construction began on what humans casually called the Nevada Dome, because apparently humans were terrible at naming things ceremoniously. The location was selected in a desert region where bizarre activities were apparently commonplace, and the local population was accustomed to strange things happening. Human engineering teams worked with Quilvorian technical advisors via video conference, designing a structure that could maintain 0.7 atmospheric pressure internally while existing in Earth's 1.02 external pressure. The technical challenges were substantial. The solutions were creative, occasionally alarming, and surprisingly effective. 8 months later, the dome stood complete. It was massive, transparent, and filled with carefully regulated low-pressure atmosphere that wouldn't cause Quilvorian organs to explosively relocate. Velox stood inside it for the first time and felt his eyeballs relax in a way they hadn't since arriving in Earth's system. It's perfect, he said quietly, staring out at the desert landscape visible through the transparent walls. I can observe Earth without dying. That's surprisingly pleasant. Outside the dome, a crowd of humans had gathered. Some were scientists. Some were government officials. Many were simply curious civilians who wanted to see the aliens who couldn't survive normal air. One entrepreneur was selling shirts reading, "I saw the squishy space visitors and all I got was this shirt and existential questions about the universe." Dr. Winterborn gave them a tour of the facility. We've got living quarters, laboratories, communication centers, and yes, food preparation areas because everyone needs to eat, even species with incompatible atmospheres. We tested everything 17 times and nobody died, which we're considering a success. Your safety standards are terrifying, Mulvrak observed. We prefer the term optimistic. Winterbourne grinned. We've also established a human facility adjacent to the dome so our teams can coordinate. Transfers happen through pressure-regulated airlocks. It's all very scientific and only moderately dangerous. Drinix was examining everything with six-fold fascination. The structural integrity is excellent. The pressure regulation is precise to .003 variance. You constructed this in 8 months. We were motivated. Also, we had essentially unlimited funding because every government on Earth wanted to be involved, and nobody wanted to be the one who said no to alien contact because of budget concerns. Money appeared from nowhere. It was beautiful. Over the following year, the Nevada Dome became a functional embassy and research facility. Quilvorian diplomats rotated through, spending weeks on Earth conducting studies, observing human civilization, and filing extensive reports about the bizarre species that thought crushing atmospheric pressure was comfortable. Simultaneously, humans visited Quilvorian stations in specially designed high-pressure suits that made them look like inflated balloons, but allowed them to survive in low-pressure environments. The exchange was awkward, ungainly, and remarkably productive. Scientists collaborated on research neither species could have conducted alone. Human engineering ingenuity, combined with Quilvorian theoretical frameworks, produced innovations in pressure adaptation, atmospheric regulation, and biological life support systems. Cultural exchange happened too. Humans learned Quilvorian languages, musical traditions, and philosophical concepts. Quilvorians studied human art, literature, and that bizarre practice humans called humor, which seemed to involve finding amusement in uncomfortable situations. I don't understand this concept called stand-up comedy, Velox admitted during one cultural briefing, watching a recording of a human comedian. Nobody really does, Mendes assured him. But we laugh anyway. That's part of the humor. That makes no sense. Exactly, now you're getting it. But while Earth and the Quilvorian supremacy developed their peculiar friendship, word spread through the galaxy. Other species took notice. Some were curious, some were concerned, and some saw opportunity. The Telvaxians arrived in Earth's system 6 months after the Nevada Dome's completion, broadcasting advertisements before they even achieved orbit. Greetings, primitive Earth species. Their transmission began, featuring a Telvaxian merchant whose enthusiasm bordered on aggressive. We are the Telvaxian Trade Consortium, and we understand you've been dealing exclusively with the Quilvorians. This is a mistake. We offer superior products, better technology, and more favorable trade terms. Please respond immediately so we can discuss your inevitable purchase of our excellent merchandise. Secretary General Mendes watched the transmission with an expression that suggested she'd dealt with pushy salespeople before and knew exactly how to handle them. She didn't respond. At all. Not a word. The Telvaxians sent 17 follow-up transmissions, each progressively more desperate, offering discounts, special limited-time deals, and bulk purchase options. Each transmission was met with complete silence. After 3 weeks, the Telvaxians gave up and left, muttering about unreasonable species and missed opportunities. That was mean, Velox observed. That was effective, Mendes corrected. We have telemarketers on Earth, aggressive salespeople trying to sell you things you don't need. The only solution is complete non-engagement. Acknowledging them only encourages persistence. You've developed immunity to Telvaxian marketing tactics through convergent evolution. Apparently. Who knew centuries of dealing with annoying sales calls would have practical applications in interspecies diplomacy? Other species approached Earth with various intentions. The Volgothian collective offered to teach humans their interpretive dance-based philosophy. Humanity politely declined, but agreed to cultural exchange programs that sent human dancers to learn Volgothian techniques, which actually proved quite popular among Earth's artistic communities. The Cravaxians showed up and immediately started scanning the asteroid belt for minerals without asking permission. When Earth objected, the Cravaxians presented a 17-page legal argument about unclaimed resources and salvage rights. Humanity responded by offering the Cravaxians a deal: limited mining rights in exchange for mining technology and refined materials. Additionally, Earth would sell water, abundant, easily accessible water, at rates the Cravaxians found impossible to refuse. The Cravaxians, after 3 weeks of calculating profit margins, accepted. They got their mining operations and cheap water transport. Humanity got advanced mining technology and a steady supply of refined rare materials. "How did you negotiate with the Cravaxians so effectively?" Velox asked, impressed. "It took us 40 years to establish stable trade relations with them. We approached them as what they are," General Kowalski explained. "Beings motivated by resource efficiency and profit margins. We made cooperation more profitable than conflict. It's just business, with slightly more math than usual. You've been part of galactic civilization for less than 2 years, and you've already figured out how to deal with the Cravaxians. That's either impressive or deeply concerning. Can't it be both?" Earth's position in galactic affairs grew not through military might, though humans definitely had weapons and weren't shy about that fact, but through practical problem-solving and stubborn determination to make impossible things work. They were the species that lived in pressure that killed most species, and didn't understand why that was remarkable. They were the species that looked at biological incompatibility and said, "Okay, but we can work around that." They were the species that had been fighting among themselves for millennia, and consequently understood negotiation, compromise, and how to recognize when someone was trying to sell you defective merchandise. But then something happened that tested whether the Earth-Quilvorian partnership was merely convenient or actually meaningful. A distress signal reached both Earth and the Quilvorian supremacy simultaneously. It came from a research station on the edge of known space. A joint operation between 5 different species studying a spatial anomaly that everyone agreed was fascinating and nobody thought was dangerous until it very suddenly became both. The signal was fragmented, distorted by whatever was happening at the station, but the core message was clear and terrifying. Unknown phenomenon, containment breach, station compromised, casualties mounting, pressure anomalies. It's changing the pressure. Sections reading 0 atmospheres, others reading 5, crew trapped, dying. Anyone receiving this, help, we need, then static, then nothing. Fleet Commander Draxil contacted Earth immediately. The transmission showed him in his command chamber, all his communication membranes inflated with urgency. "Secretary General Mendez, we've received a distress signal. Station Kepler 7, 7.3 light-years from Earth, 9.1 from our nearest outpost. 5 species, 47 personnel. Something's wrong with the atmospheric pressure throughout the station. It's fluctuating wildly." "Fluctuating how?" Mendez asked, already signaling her staff. "Randomly, catastrophically. One section shows vacuum. Another shows pressure equivalent to deep-sea conditions. The crew can't evacuate because moving between sections without proper equipment is fatal. Neither of our civilizations can reach them in time with conventional vessels. But if we combine technologies, your power generation with our propulsion systems," Mendez finished. "How long would it take to build?" "Unknown. Days? Maybe a week if we sacrifice every safety protocol and pray to whatever deities might be listening. Then we start immediately. I'll have our best engineers ready in 20 minutes. "Secretary General, this is extremely dangerous. The phenomenon causing the pressure fluctuations is unknown. We'd be sending personnel into a situation that killed a research station full of scientists. I know, but they asked for help. We're going. What followed was the most intense collaborative engineering effort in either species' history. Quilvorian power systems were integrated with human propulsion designs. Earth's manufacturing facilities produced components from Quilvorian specifications with human modifications that technically violated several laws of physics, but would probably work anyway. Assembly teams worked continuously. Human engineers who understood make it function now, perfect it later, combined with Quilvorian designers who understood elegant solutions to complex problems, produced something that was neither elegant nor simple, but would definitely go fast. The ship came together in 67 hours. It looked like someone had stuck a Quilvorian power core onto a human scout ship, wrapped the whole thing in additional engines, and added prayer as a structural component. They named it the diplomatic intervention, because someone on the naming committee had a sense of humor about desperate situations. The crew was mixed. Captain Velox commanded because he had the most experience with impossible situations. Security Chief Molvrak handled tactical decisions. Dr. Winterborn led the human science team. Commander Helena Vasquez, a human military officer with crisis response experience, coordinated operations. Drinix volunteered as science officer because she found the entire situation absolutely fascinating from a potential death perspective. They launched 71 hours after receiving the distress signal. The diplomatic intervention accelerated to velocities that made safety engineers across two civilizations weep. Human propulsion pushed by Quilvorian power generation achieved speeds neither species had thought possible with current technology. The ship shook, rattled, and complained through every warning system simultaneously, but it moved. "How fast are we going?" Vasquez asked, gripping her console as the ship vibrated. "Very," Velox replied. "That's not a number." "I know. I'm afraid if I give you the actual number, you'll realize how impossible this is, and the ship will stop working out of principle." They reached Station Kepler 7 in 4 days instead of the projected week. What they found was chaos given physical form. The station was still intact structurally, but its atmospheric systems had gone completely insane. External sensors showed pressure readings that fluctuated wildly, 0.1 atmospheres in one corridor, 3.7 in the adjacent chamber, cycling randomly every few minutes. "What caused this?" Winterborn demanded, scanning the readings with scientific horror and fascination. "Unknown," Drinix reported, all 6 of her brain lobes working frantically. The spatial anomaly they were studying appears to have been a pressure differential in space-time itself, literally a region where physical constants weren't constant. When they attempted to measure it more precisely, something destabilized. Now it's creating random pressure zones throughout the station. "Survivors?" Molvrak asked. "Detecting life signs, 19 individuals, trapped in different sections. They can't evacuate because the pressure zones keep shifting. What's safe passage one moment becomes lethal vacuum the next." "Then we go get them," Velox said firmly. "We have pressure suits designed for extreme differentials, both Quilvorian and human designs. We retrieve survivors section by section." "Captain," Vasquez said carefully, "the pressure zones are random. We could be in a safe area 1 second and exposed to 5 atmospheres the next, or vacuum. These suits weren't designed for rapid cycling between extremes." "I know. We're going anyway." The rescue operation was organized chaos, given purpose and determination. Mixed teams of humans and Quilvorians navigated the station, monitoring pressure readings that changed without warning, coordinating through zones that were alternately survivable and lethal. Humans moved through high-pressure sections that would crush Quilvorians. Quilvorians navigated low-pressure areas that would kill humans. They worked together, each species operating where they could survive, communicating constantly, pulling survivors from zones that were actively trying to kill them. "Team 2, Pressure spike in your corridor. 3.4 atmospheres. Quilvorians exit now. Team 4, vacuum alert in Section 7. Humans, seal your suits. Found 3 survivors in the research lab. They're alive but terrified, and one won't stop crying, which I completely understand given the circumstances. They found survivors from 6 different species, all injured, all terrified, all grateful beyond words. A Vrolgothian, who had tried to interpretive dance their way through the crisis and failed. 2 Kravaxians, who had been mining equipment specialists and were now just trying not to die. A Telvaxian merchant who immediately tried to sell them rescue insurance. Several others whose species names took too long to pronounce during an emergency. The rescue took 14 hours. 14 hours of navigating through pressure zones that shifted randomly, of pulling people from sections moments before atmospheric conditions went from barely survivable to definitely fatal, of working together because separation meant death. 3 rescue team members were injured when a pressure boundary shifted unexpectedly. 1 human suffered compression injuries. 2 Quilvorians experienced rapid decompression. All survived because their team members reacted immediately, pulling them to safety, providing emergency medical care, refusing to leave anyone behind. When the last survivor was aboard the diplomatic intervention, Velox ordered immediate departure. The station was unsalvageable, the anomaly unstable and growing. They left it behind, accelerating away at speeds that made the ship complain loudly but comply anyway. On the return journey, as survivors recovered in medical bays hastily modified to accommodate multiple species' biological requirements, Velox stood on the bridge beside Commander Vasquez. They watched stars stream past at impossible velocities in a ship that shouldn't exist, having saved lives that would have been lost without cooperation. "We couldn't have done this alone," Velox said quietly. "Neither could we," Vasquez agreed. "We needed your power systems. You needed our propulsion. We needed each other's pressure tolerance. We needed each other." "Is this what you meant by making impossible things possible?" "This is exactly what I meant." News of the rescue spread across the galaxy faster than physics should have allowed, but gossip always managed anyway. The partnership between species who couldn't share atmospheres had saved lives from 6 different civilizations. The diplomatic intervention became famous not for its combat capabilities, though it technically had some, but for proving that biological incompatibility didn't mean inability to cooperate. The Galactic Council officially recognized Earth as an associate member, which wasn't full membership because bureaucracy moved slower than geology, but acknowledged humanity as legitimate participants in galactic affairs. Other species began reconsidering their assumptions about what was possible. If humans and Quilvorians could work together, despite literally crushing pressure differences, maybe other impossible partnerships could function too. Trade networks formed between species who had previously avoided each other due to biological incompatibility. Cultural exchanges happened via video transmission and carefully controlled environments. Scientific collaborations multiplied. The galaxy discovered that differences didn't have to be divisions. They could be opportunities. Earth's position in galactic civilization solidified not through conquest or technological superiority, but through persistent determination to make absurd things work. They were the species that lived in conditions most species found lethal and thought it was normal. They were the species that looked at crushing atmospheric pressure and said, "This is fine, actually." They were the species that had spent millennia fighting among themselves and consequently understood negotiation, compromise, and creative problem-solving. 2 years after first contact, significant changes had occurred. The Nevada Dome had expanded into a complex housing Quilvorian diplomats, scientists, researchers, and even tourists who wanted to experience Earth despite needing protective environments to survive. Humans visited Quilvorian worlds in specialized suits that made them look ridiculous, but functionally kept them alive in low-pressure environments. Children from both species learned each other's languages through video programs. Scientists published joint research papers. Artists created collaborative works that explored what it meant to experience the universe through fundamentally different biological frameworks. The diplomatic intervention, instead of being decommissioned, became the prototype for a new class of fast-response vessels. Multiple species contributed technology: human propulsion, Quilvorian power generation, Cravaxian structural reinforcement, Volgothian navigation systems, because apparently interpretive dance had practical applications in stellar cartography that nobody had anticipated. Velox, now officially designated ambassador to Earth and associated human territories, stood in the observation room of the Nevada complex, looking out at Earth's desert landscape. Outside, human children played in pressure that would kill him in seconds. They ran, laughed, chased each other through air that was literally crushing by his species' standards. Dr. Winterbourne joined him, carrying 2 beverages. "Brought you that Quilvorian drink you enjoy. The one that tastes like organized chaos and mild panic." "Thank you." Velox accepted the container. "I was contemplating how absurd this is. 2 years ago, my eyes were exploding. Now I'm drinking imported beverages while watching human children play in my species' definition of environmental hell." "Progress is weird," Winterbourne agreed cheerfully. "We went from 'your planet is trying to kill us' to 'want to collaborate on atmospheric adaptation research' in record time. The galaxy is strange. The galaxy is wonderful. Strange, yes. Terrifying sometimes, but wonderful. Look at what we've accomplished. 2 species who can't breathe the same air working together, saving lives, building things neither could build alone. That's not strange, that's magnificent." Velox felt his eyes twitch, but this time not from stress, from something that might have been amusement. "You're extremely optimistic." "Someone has to be. You Quilvorians are all pessimists." "We prefer the term realistic. We've survived in low-pressure environments for millions of years by assuming things will go wrong and preparing accordingly. And we've survived in crushing pressure for millions of years by assuming things will work out and improvising when they don't. Different strategies, same result: survival, and now collaboration." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 beings from incompatible worlds, sharing a moment that would have been impossible without stubborn determination and mutual refusal to let physics dictate possibility. Behind them, the complex hummed with activity. Quilvorian linguists worked with human translators, developing better communication protocols. Engineers from both species designed improved pressure-adaptive technologies. Medical researchers studied treatment methods that worked across atmospheric boundaries. Chefs experimented with foods that could be enjoyed by species with different biological requirements and taste perceptions. Secretary General Mendez arrived, accompanied by Fleet Commander Draxil via holographic projection. They were discussing expansion of the Joint Fast Response Program, establishment of additional embassy complexes on both human and Quilvorian worlds, and whether the Telvaxians would eventually stop trying to sell everyone unnecessary products. "They won't," Draxil said definitively. "Telvaxians are persistent. It's genetically encoded. But Earth has proven remarkably resistant to their marketing tactics." "We've had practice," Mendez said. "Centuries of practice. We've developed immunity through exposure. It's like a vaccination against aggressive salesmanship. Weaponized consumer resistance. That's simultaneously brilliant and concerning. Welcome to humanity. We're full of simultaneously brilliant and concerning characteristics." More species made contact with Earth as years passed. Some wanted trade. Some wanted cultural exchange. Some wanted to understand how humans survived in conditions that seemed designed to kill most forms of life. Some just wanted to see the famous death pressure planet, where beings existed in atmospheric conditions that sounded like a torture method when described to low-pressure species. Humanity approached each interaction with the same practical determination that had characterized their relationship with the Quilvorians. They built pressure-adaptive facilities for species who needed them. They designed specialized suits for visiting incompatible environments. They learned languages, customs, and which species absolutely should not be introduced to each other because the resulting arguments would last centuries. They made mistakes too. Diplomatic incidents happened. Cultural misunderstandings caused problems. One memorable disaster involved a human attempting to hug a species whose biology interpreted physical contact as a declaration of mortal combat. But humans learned, adapted, and most importantly, apologized when they made errors. The galaxy had tested Earth's pressure and found humans who didn't realize they were extraordinary. The universe had assumed incompatibility meant isolation. Both had been proven wrong by species who refused to accept the differences meant impossibility. 5 years after first contact, Velox stood on the bridge of diplomatic intervention Mark 7, the newest and fastest iteration of the Impossible ship, returning from another successful rescue mission. This time they'd saved a Vrolgothian dance troupe whose ship had suffered catastrophic system failures. The Vrolgothians had spent the entire rescue attempting to choreograph their trauma into interpretive movement, which everyone agreed was very on-brand for them. Commander Vasquez was piloting. Dr. Winterbourne was analyzing the technical failures that had stranded the Vrolgothians. Mulbrack was filing security reports and complaining that rescues were becoming too routine, which was somehow making them more stressful, because routine meant complacency, and complacency meant someone would definitely die eventually. "You know what's interesting?" Vasquez said as they entered Earth's system. 5 years ago, we didn't know aliens existed. Now we're casually rescuing interpretive dancers from ship failures like it's normal. That's quite an adjustment. Is it? Velox asked. You're humans. You live in crushing pressure and think it's comfortable. You've been adjusting to impossible conditions since your species evolved. This is just more of the same. That's fair. We are pretty good at making the impossible seem normal. That's your species' most terrifying and admirable quality. You don't accept limitations. Someone says, that's impossible, and you hear, that's a challenge. Is that wrong? No. It's magnificent and concerning in equal measure. Very human. They docked at the expanded Earth Orbital Station, a joint construction project that housed multiple species in their preferred atmospheric conditions, proving that incompatibility was a problem that could be engineered around rather than a fundamental barrier to cooperation. The Vrolgothians were transferred to their species section of the station, where they immediately began choreographing a dance about their rescue titled Salvation Through Collaborative Atmospheric Diversity, which was either deeply meaningful or complete nonsense. And with Vrolgothians, it was impossible to tell. Velox prepared to shuttle down to the Nevada complex, but Mendez contacted him first. Ambassador Velox, do you have time for a meeting? There's something I'd like to discuss. It's significant. How significant? Change the future of galactic civilization. Significant. That's concerningly vague. I know, but I think you'll find it interesting. The meeting took place in one of the station's neutral conference rooms, designed with adjustable atmospheric pressure so multiple species could attend in relative comfort. Though comfort was relative when you were breathing air that was technically trying to kill you, but technology was preventing it from succeeding. Mendez was there. Draxil attended via hologram. Representatives from 6 other species participated either physically or virtually. Winterbourne was present because apparently wherever interesting scientific impossibilities occurred, he appeared like some kind of enthusiastic physicist summoned by the mere concept of challenge. Thank you all for coming, Mendez began. I'll be direct. We've proven that biological incompatibility doesn't prevent cooperation. Different species with different requirements can work together, build together, and save lives together. We've done it repeatedly. What I'm proposing is we formalize this. Formalize how? A Kravaxian representative asked. A coalition, an alliance of incompatible species who work together because we're different, not despite it. We pool resources, share technology, provide mutual assistance, and prove that differences are strengths rather than divisions. The Galactic Council already exists for this purpose, Draxil pointed out. The Galactic Council is bureaucratic and slow, Mendez countered. It serves a purpose, but it's reactive rather than proactive. What I'm proposing is more flexible. A coalition focused on rapid response, technological collaboration, and mutual support. Species join voluntarily. No mandatory military alliances, no forced political integration, just cooperation based on mutual benefit and shared goals. You want to create a subset organization within galactic civilization focused on practical cooperation, Velox summarized. Exactly. We call it the Coalition of Adaptive Species, because we all adapt. Humans adapted to crushing pressure. Quilvorians adapted to low pressure. Every species here adapted to conditions others find impossible. That adaptability is our strength. Let's use it collectively. Debate followed. Concerns were raised about political implications, resource distribution, decision-making processes, and what to do about the Telvaxians who would inevitably try to sell coalition membership packages. But eventually, consensus emerged. Not unanimous agreement, that never happened when multiple species were involved, but enough support to proceed. The Coalition of Adaptive Species was established 3 months later. Founding members included Earth, the Quilvorian Supremacy, the Kravaxian Mining Collective, 3 other species, and surprisingly, the Vrolgothians, who claimed the coalition's formation was cosmically aligned with the universal dance of cooperation, which nobody understood, but everyone accepted because Vrolgothians were harmless if philosophically confusing. The coalition didn't replace existing governmental structures, it supplemented them, provided rapid response capabilities, facilitated technology exchange, funded joint research projects, proved repeatedly that impossible partnerships could function spectacularly well when everyone involved refused to accept impossibility as an excuse. 10 years after first contact, the galaxy looked different, not politically. The same governments existed, the same councils argued, the same conflicts simmered, but philosophically. The assumption that biological incompatibility meant inevitable isolation had been shattered by species who simply refused to accept that limitation. Pressure-adaptive facilities existed on dozens of worlds. Mixed species crews operated vessels designed with multiple atmospheric zones. Children from different species learned together via virtual classrooms that accommodated everyone's requirements. The impossible had become routine. Velox stood in the Nevada complex, now expanded into essentially a small city with both pressurized and normal pressure zones, watching Earth's sunset paint the desert spectacular colors. Nearby, human and Quilvorian children played in adjacent areas, separated by transparent pressure barriers, but communicating happily through translation devices and gestures. Dr. Winterbourne joined him, now significantly older, but no less enthusiastic about impossible things. "Thinking profound thoughts?" Winterbourne asked. "Thinking about how absurd this still is," Velox admitted. "A decade ago, my species had never met yours. We came here, our eyes exploded, we ran away terrified. Now our children play together separated only by atmospheric pressure differentials and powered by stubborn determination that physics shouldn't dictate friendship." Sounds about right. Humanity's been defying physics since we figured out fire, just adding friends to the equation. "Your species is ridiculous. Thank you. We try very hard." They watched the sunset together, two beings from impossible worlds, representatives of species who had proven that crushing pressure and explosive decompression were just engineering problems waiting for solutions. The galaxy had tested Earth's pressure, had watched soldiers' eyes explode on contact, had assumed that meant inevitable incompatibility. The galaxy had been wrong. Because humanity had looked at pressure that killed most species and thought this is normal, had encountered aliens who couldn't survive their atmosphere and thought, okay, but we can build them a place where they can survive, had faced biological impossibility and responded with sounds like a challenge. And the Quilvorians, terrified of crushing death but curious enough to try anyway, had met them halfway, had shared knowledge, built together, risked together, and discovered that survival wasn't about having the same requirements. It was about respecting different ones. The sunset faded. Lights activated throughout the complex. Humans and Quilvorians and half a dozen other species continued their work, their research, their cooperation, proving every single day that impossibility was just a word used by people who hadn't tried hard enough. Earth's pressure remained unchanged, still crushing by galactic standards, still lethal to most species, still completely normal to humans who had evolved there and couldn't understand why anyone found it remarkable. And that ordinariness, that complete failure to recognize their own extraordinariness, had changed galactic civilization more profoundly than any weapon or technology could have managed. The universe would remember this. The day species who should have been incompatible decided incompatibility wasn't an acceptable excuse for isolation. The moment crushing pressure became not a barrier, but a bridge. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, in a dome that defied reasonable atmospheric physics, an alien whose eyes had once exploded upon arrival now lived peacefully, working alongside species he would never be able to breathe the same air with, proving every moment that differences weren't divisions. They were opportunities waiting for someone stubborn enough to make them work.